Hello everybody and welcome. Before you say anything, yes, I'm aware I look like a walking, talking corpse right now, but for this video's sake I'm at least on theme. We are going to be ranking all of the Walking Dead comic book series from worst to best. Obvious spoiler warning ahead for all that I'm going to be talking about. If you haven't read the comic book series, then this is your chance to leave. Also, a massive opinion warning ahead. This video is entirely based on my own opinion, so if you have a fragile ego and you don't like hearing people's opinions differing from your own, then this is not the video for you. As I previously just stated, this video is about the Walking Dead comic book series, so I will not be talking about the Walking Dead AMC show to the best of my ability. There may be some comparisons here and there, but for the most part, this is just the comic book series I'm going to be talking about today. But yeah, we're going to be ranking the Walking Dead comic book volumes from worst to best. I do have all of the Walking Dead volumes just down there out of frame if I need to refer to them during any point in this video. This will indeed be all 32 volumes ranked. Can I be asked to pick them all up? Yeah, you know what, go on then. Ugh, fuck me. Oh, don't actually. This is a comic book series that I hold very near and dear to my heart, which makes my opinion just objective fact. This comic book series is also extremely heavy, which is why I'm going to put them down now. Alright, thank God, now that all that housekeeping is out of the way, let's cut to my screen. Now, this, ladies and germs, is what we in the industry like to call a tier list. But I guess without any further ado, let's get in and rank the very first volume, Days Gone By. I'm just going to get this out of the way, straight into S tier with this thing. My main argument for being so sure of this placement is, if it wasn't for this volume, we wouldn't have The Walking Dead, period. Like, we wouldn't have the video games, the multitude of TV spin-offs. The best word to describe this volume is bold. It sets up the story and what to expect from it perfectly, in my opinion. With, like I say, them killing off Shane just like that is just such a genius thing to do, of setting up the status quo of the series. But it's just so iconic outside of that. The stuff in Atlanta with Rick and Glenn, the sequence in the hospital is amazing, the stuff with Morgan. If you're putting this anything lower than S tier, then nothing gets to go above it. That's my thing about it. Right, now moving on to Volume 2, Miles Behind Us. This has more bold, early Walking Dead goodness. I reckon it's a B though, where I do feel that these first two volumes very much has a breakneck pace. I think the first volume gets away with it because it is getting the entire Walking Dead franchise off the ground, whereas the second one, I feel like it could have settled down and given us more character development, but instead it goes for more bullet pointy, like, shocking moments to kind of keep us hooked, which I can respect them doing here, but I do feel like it's a tiny bit rushed. Like, we did burn through the stuff at Wiltshire Estate and the farm a bit too fast, in my opinion. Though that stuff in the comics is good, I would have liked more time there. A few standouts in this volume, though, is we meet Tyrese here in this volume, I believe. And also, Carl gets fucking shot. So, this volume isn't without its plus sides, which is why I feel like I have to break the even. It's not the worst, it's not the best, it's just kind of there, in the middle. But overall, it is just a stepping stone and not much more for the story, in my opinion at least. Plus side, though, that we never got to see in the show, and here I am talking about the show even though I said I would not talk about the show and compare. But we get to see Snow in Volume 2, and we get to see the struggles of supplies dwindling and the struggles of the harsh climate, which was nice to see in Volume 2. Okie dokie, now we move on to the third volume, Safety Behind Bars. This one is fucking amazing. I'm sticking it in A with the potential of being pushed up to S later on. This is the volume where the group obviously reach the prison. This is where the friction between the prisoners starts. This is where Tomos attacks Andrea. And this is where the severed heads of those girls were found as well. This is a dark volume. The setting is fucking excellent. The entire prison arc is pretty excellent. There aren't many spots in the prison arc of the comics that I don't love to pieces. Oh, this is also the one where Rick returns to Shane's grave because we start to get clued in that that, you know, the we're all infected thing. Basically, you turn into a walker whether or not you're bitten, which is a great twist as well. This volume is just excellent. It goes so hard. I think this easily deserves A. Now we move on to volume 4, The Heart's Desire. This one I remember being a very, very big one. This is where all the stuff with Alan's leg happens, isn't it? Yeah, where it gets amputated after he gets bit. Because then when Alan dies, Tyrese and Rick have that fight, and they both fucking get beaten to a bloody pulp. Yeah, this volume's pretty fucking sick, dude. We also meet Michonne in this one, don't we? Yeah. Ooh. Hi B. What do my notes say? Are there anything else I've forgotten in here? Oh, this is the one that they say we're the Walking Dead. Okay, cool. A tier for Heart's Desire. Damn, what a good volume. Okay, cool. Right, there we go. Volume 4, Heart's Desire. Now let's move on to Volume 5, The Best Defense. This one is the introduction to Woodbury, if I remember rightly. How much of Woodbury do we see? Do we see all of it? We see the governor's heads in jars. We see the governor's daughter. We get the we feed them people line, which is a great moment. We get Rick's hand, of course. And we get the helicopter crash. Okay, this is another fucking amazing volume, dude. Yeah. Oh, is this an S tier? I do love Woodbury. All of the Woodbury stuff is pretty good. Oh, do I put it S? No, I'm gonna be strong because I know the series just gets so much better than this in the future. Yeah, another excellent one. Best Defense, Volume 5. Right, Volume 6. Let's move on to This Sorrowful Life. Another big one. This is where we get the Michonne v Governor fight, and we get Michonne doing all sorts of naughty fun things to the governor while he's unconscious. We also get the escape from Woodbury, and we get that fake out moment where we think that the governor's like attacked when they return. That's a good moment. And probably my favorite thing of this volume is Rick running down Martinez. That's a really, really hype moment. This is where we start to see like Rick, well, not turn feral, but he's losing it a bit. He's becoming a lot more unhinged, I guess, in this volume, which was a lot of fun to see. Yeah, this is another good one. I reckon this is another A tier volume. Maybe it's a high B above Miles Behind Us. No, I think it deserves A. I think it's pretty good. It gets a low A for me. It's pretty great. Right, Volume 7, The Calm Before. This one is pretty chill, I think I remember, for like the most part. There is a lot of hype stuff in the last issue of it, but all the stuff leading up to it is very calm. A lot of character development, which I'm a big proponent for, having lulls in story to kind of check in with your characters and see how they're coping. But if it wasn't for the final issue in this volume, this would be down in C. But because of the stuff that happens in like the final few pages of this thing is why it gets pushed up to above Miles Behind Us, because we see Dale get bitten on the leg, Glenn gets shot point blank, but he has his riot suit on, thank goodness. We get Judith is born and Carol unalives herself, essentially. Yeah, it's packed towards the end, but like the lead up to it is a slow burn, which is why it scrapes in just above Miles Behind Us, is those final few elements that happen towards the end. But no, Calm Before, excellent stuff once again. But then we have an absolute doozy of a volume. This one, Volume 8, this ranked very high in my top 10 volumes of The Walking Dead that I made like back in 2020. This thing, there is a reason why it is, why like the prison massacre is still referenced to this day, like so many years after it was adapted to the show. The show's version of it, and here I am talking about the show and comparing it to the comic, but the show's version of it does not compare to how brutal Made to Suffer is. I think it might go above Days Gone By as well. Right now, this is the creme de la creme of the Walking Dead comic book series. Everything that the series was leading up to was this. We see so many storylines come to a head. We see so many characters get killed off here. It is just a shock and awe, just gore fest. It is ferocious, frankly. Let's just go through some of the biggest moments in it. I mean, obviously we see the governor roll up to the prison with the tank and completely lob off Tyrese's head with the katana. And then, like I say, the massacre where we see Herschel, Patricia, Alice die, among others, those just to name a few. And then obviously when the prison falls and everyone has to escape, we see that horrific moment where Laurie and Judith just get shot down as they're running away, which always catches people off guard, especially people that have watched the TV series and see things play out differently for both Laurie and Judith. Yeah, that moment never fails to shock people. This volume as a whole is just an action-packed thrill ride the entire way through, and it's perfect. It's perfect sort of like popcorn comic book stuff. Like if you've just opened up a comic book and want to read something that will just entertain you and shock you, look no further than Made to Suffer. It is gnarly, to say the least. And to say the most, it completely cemented the Walking Dead comic book series as a no-hold-bars, willing to do literally anything as long as it services the grander narrative of The Walking Dead. Because The Walking Dead, literally Robert Kirkman's pitch of The Walking Dead comic book series is that it's the zombie movie that never ended. And this is a climax. This is one of a few climaxes of The Walking Dead comics that, like I say, define it as to what it is and what it can do. But yeah, with all that rambling out of the way, I guess now we'll move on to Volume 9, Here We Remain. A much slower paced piece, a lot more different than anything we've seen before in the comics. Like before, we'd seen the entire group chugging along, doing what they could with the circumstances they're in. This one is very isolating. It, for the most part, is just Rick and Carl. There are bits towards the end where we finally reunite with people like Michonne, but for the most part, it is just Rick and Carl on their own, and I really dig it, because after a volume like Made to Suffer, this is the only way to really follow it up, is just Rick and Carl essentially licking their wounds, because fuck me, they were grieving in this one. This is the volume where we get the introduction to like Laurie on the phone talking to Rick, and I believe this is also the one where Abraham's group is introduced like towards the end, which is cool. I'm a big fan of Abraham and like Eugene and Rosita, so I'm glad that we got to see the crew show up finally. It's a slower one, but it's much more subtle in what it tries to do. It really does like explore the psyche of some of our favorite characters, or some of our surviving characters, I should say, because we lost like more than half of the cast in Made to Suffer, so this volume was very much back to basics, which is why I'm gonna rank it behind The Calm Before. No, yeah, the Calm Before's a bit better. I'm sticking it here because I like the subtlety of it, and yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. Right, volume 10. We're on the double digits already. We have What We Become. This one has some of my favorite moments in the entire comic book series, frankly. This is the first volume where we see like a walker horde, like a full-on sea of like walkers in one clump, and how threatening that could be. That was a big moment for the series. We also get the return of Morgan in this one. We obviously get the Savage Rick moment where he like bites the neck out of one of the scavenger dudes. Absolutely hype. Just fucking so brutal and gruesome, and it is exactly what you look for in a zombie comic book series, as something as graphic as that. And then it does have the moment where Maggie attempts to, you know, unalive herself. The YouTube doesn't like the word, but Maggie tries to do that, and that creates a lot of conflict between like Abraham and Rick, which is really exciting to see like tension brewing there within the group there. So all in all, a lot of cool stuff happening in here. A lot of very, very tense and noteworthy stuff. So I'm thinking of putting this in above Sorrowful Life, above Heart's Desire, Not above Safety Behind Bars, though. I reckon that's a good placement for this one. All right, now we move on to Fear the Hunters, Volume 11. This one, oh my goodness, this one is, oh, it's so good. I'm just going to put it out there. This one is like one of my absolute favorites. I will lose no sleep knowing that this has gone straight up to S tier. Above Days Gone By. Above Made to Suffer. Oh, oh. What has it got in it? Let me go to my notes. Obviously, it's got the stuff with the cannibals. We've got one of my favorite bits in the entire comic book series with Dale and the tainted meat line because he's been bitten. We meet Father Gabriel in this one, and we get to like introduced to like his church. This is also the volume where Ben kills Billy, and then later Carl kills Ben. And all of the stuff at the end with Rick and the gang essentially brutalizing the hunters is just so fucking haunting, because you don't see what they do to the cannibals. You just see like a splash panel of like the blooded up torture weapons that they used in the previous scene that we didn't get to see. Like, Rick did some ungodly things to those men and it is so haunting to see. I think this goes above Made to Suffer. I think the thing is that like with Fear the Hunters, the idea of having cannibals being like an adversary is such an inspired idea, and I think they play it off masterfully. I think Fear the Hunters is better than Made to Suffer, which I believe is the first major deviation from my original Walking Dead volumes video from 3 years ago. So there you go. Already my opinion has changed. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Write it in the comments and I will not care. Alright, now we move on to Volume 12, which is Life Among Them. A lot of good moments coming up in this volume that I do really like. We see the introduction to Aaron in this volume, and we get to Alexandria in this one actually, don't we? Oh my goodness, we do, which means we also get the revelation that Eugene isn't a scientist, right? He doesn't know what the cure is, which is a big moment for the comics. But then obviously, like, we move on very fast from that. I didn't realize we moved on that fast from the Eugene revelation to then getting to Alexandria. And then, like I say, meeting Douglas and how many more people, like Nicholas and Heath and so many important characters that will play bigger roles later, right? This one's a really good one too. I reckon we go B. B's a respectable placement. Above or behind Miles Behind Us? Miles Behind Us does have Carl getting shot. Oh yeah, but the Eugene revelation is pretty good. Am I going to be putting it above Miles Behind Us? I feel really bad because Volume 2 is not a bad volume. Nah, I'll put it above. I'm sticking to my guns. It's going above. Yeah, Volume 12, Life Among Them. Volume 13, Too Far Gone. This one is also pretty good. There are a lot of great payoffs to Volume 12 in this one, if I remember rightly. We get the Rick versus Pete fight. We get Rick pulling a gun on Douglas and the community and doing his big spiel about how no one knows how to survive in here, which is just peak Walking Dead, if you ask me. That's like one of the defining moments of Rick Grimes being like just an absolute, beast for one. Also, we get that storyline come to a boiling point where Pete and Regina die at that meeting, which is a great moment once again. Another great moment for Rick. I love it. We also get the like scavenger guy showing up at the gates but getting very quickly wiped out by Rick's group, which I'm a bit mixed on that moment because it kind of comes out of nowhere and they kind of get wiped out of nowhere. It's kind of like a moment that doesn't really hold any weight or any payoff or any foreshadowing to anything else. Yeah, it's pretty good. Too Far Gone is pretty good. I'm gonna stick it at the top of B, above the Calm Before. Now we move on to one of the climaxes of The Walking Dead, Volume 14, No Way Out. This one is basically a staple in The Walking Dead as a franchise. There is something about this one that just is definitive Walking Dead in a nutshell. When you sign up to to commit to a comic book series about a zombie apocalypse, this is the sort of volume that you expect to see, and it pays off massively. What it is basically just a wintertime that Alexandria is surrounded on all sides by a sea of walkers, and there's no way out, as the name suggests. It is excellent in so many ways, and if it was just for the concept of them being boxed in, it wouldn't be S tier. It's for the little moments in between and all of those little shock horror bits that make it S tier. The Jesse and Ron thing, where Ron gets nommed on and then Jesse gets mauled to death as well because she's just watched her son get ripped apart. And then obviously Douglas firing off his shots blindly and one of them hitting Carl's eye. What a moment, because Carl has already got shot once before in this series and he lived. What are the chances of it happening again? Like, at the end of the day, Carl is like the character that should have the thickest plot armor, and in hindsight he does, and that's absolutely fine. That's what you expect. The main character's son should be the most safe of this series. I'm looking at you, TV show. But having that moment where where Rick looks over and you just see Carl's eye socket, just a big crater, and him saying, "Dad," it is... when I read that for the first time, I was blown away. I was in so much shock. It's such a series-defining moment. It's going above Days Gone By, and it's going above Made to Suffer. And I think it does deserve to be above Fear the Hunters. Yeah, I think it does deserve to be the best of the best at the moment. Spoiler alert, though, it does get top. But anyway, now we move on to Volume 15, We Find Ourselves. This one, I'm going to quickly get out of the way. This one's not as noteworthy as previous ones. The main appeal of this one is that it's wintertime and the novelty of supplies dwindling, the group really suffering, but also the added effect of the group recovering from the fucking horrors that they went through. But beyond those elements, there aren't too many things that make me want to come back and read this thing again. That's not to say it's bad. It's not bad. To be honest, there's not a single volume in the Walking Dead comic book series that is what I would call bad. There are just some stronger volumes than others. A few moments that I do like are quite subtle and small, like Carl's recovery and him basically waking up and saying, "Where's Mum?" which hits so fucking deep. And then Rick's moment where he's talking to Andrea later on and essentially saying, "I've lost my little boy," which is such a heartbreaking moment. But outside of that, there's not too much else, if I remember rightly. There is the Alexandria, like, sort of mini rebellion against Rick, where, like, Nicholas pulls a gun or whatever, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and it is basically squashed in the same volume, which, yeah, I mean, it's a fun little moment to have in there, but yeah, it doesn't really amount to much. But yeah, Volume 15, We Find Ourselves. Now moving on to Volume 16, A Larger World. A bit more noteworthy than the previous one, but still, it's a lot of setup for the next stage in the story, essentially, which is fine. It serves its purpose. This volume is where we meet Jesus, and we have that whole extended exchange with Jesus and, like, sort of getting to know him and all of the kerfuffle that happens there. We also do see the hilltop, which at the time, it is such a cool thing to be able to see, like, another settlement in the apocalypse, because outside of Alexandria and Woodbury, we'd not really seen anything like that before in the comics. So to see the hilltop in such its grand scale is just so fucking cool. And I'm sorry, I know I said I wouldn't compare the show to the comic too much, but I do have to say that the scale in comparison between Hilltop from comics to, like, show, it's night and day. The show does, like, no justice to the Hilltop, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. It's it was quite a great moment to see the Hilltop for the first time in the comic. But what I will say is it's top of C, because I feel like the novelty of, like, seeing Hilltop and the scale of it and absolute mind-blowingness of it has worn off to an extent. That doesn't mean it's not got good moments. There is that moment towards the end when Rick savagely kills that guy that attacks him, and he's got, like, blood all over him, and he does the "what" moment, which is Which honestly, one thing I will say, translates great to the TV show. That's such a good moment. But yeah, it's a decent volume, but it's a lot of setup. Yeah, Larger World, Volume 16. It's decent. It does the job that it needs to, which is set up Volume 17, which is Something to Fear. Let me just do this right away. Better than Days Gone By. Is it better than Made to Suffer? It has issue 100 in there. It might actually be better than Made to Suffer. Do I dare? Let's go through the moments in Something to Fear, because there is stuff in this volume that blows everything in the series that happened before it out of the water in terms of shock value and brutality and just sheer horror. We have that exchange between Rick and like the first biker gang they meet, and how Rick's gang makes very quick work of them, which, much like the moment where the scavengers show up to the Grate of Alexandria in Too Far Gone, this moment further lulls us into a false sense of security that, oh, Rick's group can handle anything. There's this, which is a fun moment, but it obviously leads into issue 100 very nicely. We get the intro to Dwight as he kills Abraham, which is a fucking horrific moment to see. We get the brilliant moment of Eugene essentially chowing down on Dwight's dangly bits when he's threatening them, which is such a funny moment and is a turning point for Eugene's character, actually, as well. Eugene's one of my favorite characters in both versions of The Walking Dead, frankly. So seeing moments like that with Eugene actually growing and changing is fun to see. And also it's just funny as well. But obviously the reason this is up here in S, beyond those moments as well, is issue 100, where Negan is introduced and promptly disposes of Glenn in the most brutal fashion ever. The Lucille moment is iconic in Walking Dead and even pop culture as a whole for a reason. This is where it was birthed. This is where it was born. And for God, is it better than Made to Suffer though? I think it might be, you know. For all that it does in the series, what Something to Fear does on a more fundamental level, beyond all the shock moments and how many people die, the body count in this one, beyond all of that, what Something to Fear does more than Made to Suffer does is it changes essentially the status quo of the Walking Dead series as a whole, full stop. Before this, the group was fine. They were chilling. Every adversary they'd come across, they overcome. Some to greater success than others. The governor was like the biggest oversight they'd had. But for the most part, they overcome their obstacles. But this one, they were out of their depth. They fought and they lost. For the first time, they lost. You can make an argument that they lost in Made to Suffer, sure. But in here, nothing is the same after this. Nothing is the same after issue 100. Negan's here, and Negan's here to stay. It is that good. Yeah. Volume 17, Something to Fear. It's... I don't know whether it's better than Made to Suffer, but just by principle, I want to put it higher because it deserves the credit. Right, Volume 18. What comes after? This one is amazing. On original read, I really overlooked this one. But when I did my most recent marathon of the entire comics, I forgot how many of my favorite Negan moments happened in this one. Obviously, we get the aftermath of Glenn. This is obviously in here. But we essentially get little soldier boy Carl visiting Willy Wonka's chocolate factory and Negan giving him the tour, which is such an amazing sequence. I fucking love everything to do with Carl and Negan in this volume, and in the larger story as well. Negan and Carl's dynamic has always been something that I've really enjoyed. We get Rick and Negan essentially throwing down, which is a very, very tense moment because this is the first time that Rick essentially stands up to Negan since the incident, which is such a thing to be like, oh, Rick, don't push it, mate, because Negan's just killed one of his best friends in the previous volume. I believe this is also where we see the Kingdom for the first time. Oh my goodness, it is. Holy shit. Okay, yeah, this volume's great. This is going in A tier. Bottom of A for me. Above Sorrowful Life. You know what? It's going above Sorrowful Life, but not above Heart's Desire. Just below it for me. One extra thing that is really, really fun reading what comes after is just the absolute colourful language of Negan is just so entertaining. Negan is the best written character in the comics. He is so good. Yeah, cool. Right. Volume 19, March to War. This one is a good one too. Let me refer to my notes. This one I'm a bit hazy on. To be honest, volume 19, 20, and 21 are all a big blur to me because a lot of those moments kind of coincide with each other. Okay, it's this volume we find out Maggie is pregnant. We also get the really hype last issue of this volume where we get essentially Andrea's watchtower fight, and we get the stuff outside of the gates of Alexandria. Oh, and we get the we got the big Spencer moment as well, where it's like the got no guts bit, where Spencer essentially tries to sell out Rick, and Negan's having none of it. Which, like I say, leads to Andrea's watchtower fight. Yeah, this one's pretty good. I think this one is probably gonna land somewhere in B tier, behind or above Miles Behind Us, behind Life Among Them. Yeah, behind Life Among Them, I reckon. This is some good moments, but it is quite a bit of just setup for all-out war, besides like the final issue. So yeah, but it does the job very expertly, and there are a lot of little moments in there that are quite fun, to be honest. So yeah, volume 19, March to War. Right, now we move on to All Out War Part 1 and Part 2. I'm going to largely rank these things as one, I reckon, because All Out War as a whole is like an entire piece that needs to be like sort of looked at objectively. But if I were to like put them against each other, I do definitely think I prefer Part 1 over Part 2, which may be a hot take, but I don't really care. The difference between my preference of the two is so inconsequential and minute that it doesn't fucking matter. But I do believe that All Out War does deserve A tier, so I'm going to put both here, and I'm going to put Part 1 ahead of it. I think it's better than Sorrowful Life. I do think it's better than what comes after, if not just barely. Is Heart's Desire better or worse than All Out War? We'll go into the specific All Out War moments in a minute, don't worry. Heart's Desire had We Are the Walking Dead, Alan's Leg, Tyrese versus Rick, and Meeting Michonne. No, yeah, I think All Out War just lands slightly behind Heart's Desire. I'm happy with that. The reason why Part 1 is just slightly better than Part 2 is because Part 1 has a lot of my more favourable moments from All Out War, which has like the attack on the Sanctuary and the Walker Holly essentially being like a Trojan horse for Alexandria, which is a great moment. We get Shiva and Eric dying. We get the grenades being thrown into Alexandria, which leads to Heath's leg getting blown off. A lot of really big, high-stake like action piece moments that I really enjoy reading. Whereas Part 2 is less about those shock horror moments and more just about like sort of like the conclusion of this chapter of The Walking Dead, because after volume 21 the series is not really the same. There is like a soft reboot after it, right? So this one is a lot of just winding down all of what's happened before, essentially all of the Negan stuff, being like, okay, this is how we conclude it in a satisfying way, which I'm happy with. But for that reason, Part 1 has a lot more of the more exciting moments for me. Part 2 mostly just had them leaving Alexandria, the Negan like infection trick where he like gunks up Lucille with like Walker guts effectively, and we do get that fake out death with Rick. Well, it's not really a fake out death, but it's sort of like a bit of tension there for a bit where we think that we might lose Rick when he gets shot with like an infected crossbow bolt by Dwight, which adds an extra cool element because you think that Dwight's like sold out Rick's gang for Negan again. But outside of that and the Rick and Negan fight at the end, there's not too much more that I like from Part 2. But as a whole, All Out War as like a full 2-part story is such a fun read from front to back. These 2 volumes are so entertaining. So there you go. That was All Out War volumes 20 and 21. Now let's move on to the post-time skip with A New Beginning. For a long time, this was a volume I overlooked. I really never thought much about this volume until I went back to it in the latest 2 marathons that I did of The Walking Dead. This has so many small moments in there that really help to build the building blocks of the post-time skip Walking Dead. Because you have the year later stuff and you realize the group is essentially so much more advanced in the apocalypse. In 1 year, the group has advanced so much to the point where they have essentially a military that has the art of kiting walkers in like a horde down to a science, right? And it is so entertaining to see how far the characters have come since All Out War and like the sort of world they've built, which is so fun to see. We get the introduction to Magna's group, and we get the brief tension where we think that she might fuck with Rick and his group, and the Negan in the jail cell. Really fun to see Negan post time skip, sort of neutered and much more subtle in tone. And yeah, this volume I think deserves a B. A younger me would have put it in C or D. Also, I love the fact that there are no volumes in D right now. I just want to point out that fact, because if there's any proof that to anyone that I love this series, is that this tier list is so fucking front-loaded already. And it just goes to show that even The Walking Dead, in its moments where it's just full-on setup and character building, it still reaches like mid-tier for me at the lowest for New Beginning, because New Beginning is a lot of fun. But what I will do is shoot this right up to above Life Among Them, maybe even above We Find Ourselves. Yeah, above Calm Before. Above Too Far Gone? No, not above Too Far Gone. The reason why it's all the way up here and not at the bottom of B is because of the talking walkers thing. What I mean by that is because before, and obviously people who read the comic book series know what's coming next with the Whisperers, but the concept of talking walkers was fucking mind-blowing at the time. I was reading these issues as they were being released, and I was just as miffed as everyone else when the issue came out where the concept of talking infected walkers came to be. And it was fucking terrifying to have the prospect that walkers were evolving. Because think about it this way, the idea and concept of the Whisperers wasn't like a thought in anyone's minds like before this point. Like people in like skin masks, people weren't having theories about that at the time. All that people were thinking was, what the fuck? Are the walkers really evolving? Are they learning to track humans? Are they learning to talk amongst themselves and communicate? It was such a frightening concept at the time, because what that meant for the survivors was, how the fuck do they overcome this obstacle of just fucking evolution among the dead? What I can't put into words how mind-blowing the prospect of that was at the time. Walkers were talking now. Okay, now let's move on to 23, Whispers into Screams. This is another excellent one. The Whisperer saga of The Walking Dead is my favorite era of a lot of my favorite Walking Dead moments are during the Whisperer arc, so it's going to be no surprise that I'm going to want to put Whisperers into Screams at the top of B. Whisperer's proper introduction, we have the end of the line moment where we meet up with Alpha for the first time through Dante, I believe. We get the introduction to Lydia as well. We get Gregory and his grand conspiracy against Maggie, which is good tension as well on Maggie's side. One of the reasons I also love the Whisperer arc is also because of how much of a boss Maggie is in this era of The Walking Dead. It is so entertaining to see how far she's come. We also get, one of my favorite moments in here is like the Sophia and Carl incident with those 2 boys and the shovel, and basically Carl takes a leaf out of Negan's vocabulary and basically spits slurs and F words out of his gobshite to those 2 boys who are fucked with him and Sophia, and he becomes just enraged. It's one of my favorite moments from Carl in the entire comic book series, frankly, and it is so entertaining to see. One of my last gripes about the show is that I'm so upset that we never got to see any of these sort of Carl moments in the show. 23. I reckon it probably is fine where it is at the top of B, because it is just the starting point for the Whisperers and not much else. We get to see those first interactions with Lydia and Carl, which are very well done. And the mystique of the Whisperers is still very much apparent, and the sort of like, it's very fun to just see the Whisperers still hidden behind the veil a bit. We don't get to see their full force or what they can do, what they're capable of, until the next volume, which is Life and Death, which I'm just gonna quickly say, S tier, above Days Gone By, above Made to Suffer. We'll see whether it's better than Something to Fear. We'll go through the moments, but Life and Death is another defining moment in The Walking Dead's history for mostly its final issue and final moment, but we'll go through everything that it has beyond that first. We get Gregory getting hung by Maggie, which is a big moment because Gregory's been around for a while at this point. We get the moment with Negan with the jail cell being unlocked, but he stays in there and becomes like an obedient dog or whatever. It's a fun moment where Rick like discovers that the jail cell is unlocked and Negan's just chilling in there like, sup bro, how's it hanging? I love that bit. The stuff with the fair is really fun, and the foreshadowing to the final moment in this thing is also really tense and exciting. And getting to see Alpha walking among the fairground is also fucking expertly done and expertly crafted to build tension. But obviously the stuff that earns this volume pride and place in the S tier is because of Alpha chauffeuring Rick over to her mega horde that she is in charge of, that she could set on Alexandria or Hilltop at any time she likes. If Rick crosses the border, then they're fucked, essentially. This Walker horde that she's in charge of gets basically sicked upon the communities and they get wiped out. And a great moment is the bit where Rick goes, what border? And then Alpha just drops the line, something like, oh, you'll see it as you leave, don't you worry. you'll know it when you see it. And then they see it, they see the border, they see the boundary, which is a row of pikes full of previously missing characters with their severed heads on top of said pikes. It is one of the most shocking moments. There are not many moments in the Walking Dead series that have left my jaw on the floor as long as Life and Death. Seeing those characters just displayed on those pikes as trophies is such a fucking horrific scene. It sets the tone for what else is to come in the Whisperer saga of the Walking Dead comics. I don't know if it beats Something to Fear though. I think I'm fine with it being sat here just above Something as Made to Suffer. But yeah, now we move on to volume 25, which is No Turning Back. This one is a tiny bit slower, has a lot more setup if I remember rightly, which is fine. The series needs it. We have obviously Rick declaring war on the Whisperers. We have Dwight leaving the sanctuary. We have Morton attacking Rick. And my favourite sort of sequence in this volume is Rick essentially heeding Negan's advice, leadership advice that is, about how Negan used to rule the sanctuary through fear and uniting them against a common enemy, is just so cool, because like when he does that big speech about how the Silence the Whisperers spiel essentially is born, it then cuts from Alexandria cheering Rick's name to then Negan in the cell hearing those chants and cheers and him saying, "Attaboy, Rick," which is such a fun moment. Negan has always been like one of my favorite characters in the comics, so that was a fun moment to see. It's some of the best moments between Rick and Negan are in this volume, so that does give it automatic points. So for that reason, I'm gonna stick it. It definitely deserves B. I've put so many volumes in B, I can't keep putting them in B. Or can I? We'll see. I'm gonna put it at the top of C for now, with the meek promise of it moving up. Maybe. Who knows? Who knows at this point? This comic book series is so damn good that nothing's landed in the lowest tier. It's ridiculous, frankly. And now we move on to volume 26, which is A Call to Arms. A another packed volume. This is another volume on my original read that I overlooked at the time. And then when I revisited the entire series on my marathon, I realized just how many of my favorite moments during the Whisperer arc happen here. We get the first instance of Eugene's radio reaching contact with what we will later realize will be the Commonwealth. We get the Aaron and Michonne versus Beta fight, which is a lot of fun. We get Brandon attacking Rick and then later letting Negan out, and that entire sequence is a lot of fun. This entire volume is just a very Negan-centric volume. If you're a fan of Negan, this might be one of your favorites, and it's one of my favorites, frankly. We get Negan being set free and then killing Brandon, and then later Negan meeting Frowny McTwo-Knives. And I believe at the end of this one, we also see him kill Alpha, if I remember rightly. Oh my goodness, yes. This volume is really sick. Okay, this slips into A tier for the sheer fact that Negan kills Alpha. It's going above Sorrowful Life, above what comes after, but behind All Out War. Huh. I don't know. Ooh, what do I do? I'm gonna put it above All Out War, you know. I think this has some of my favorite Walking Dead moments. Above Heart's Desire. Behind What We Become. Behind What We Become, above Heart's Desire. I'm happy with that placement, actually. Call to Arms is actually pretty sick. They did not need to go this hard on a setup volume. But, like I say, it's set up for the Whisperer War, and yet all those moments I mentioned, plus more, really elevates it to, like, near the top of A tier for me. Excellent stuff. I love this one. Right, now we move on to the Whisperer War. Okay, this is where I might get a tiny bit of hate, but this one did not live up to as much of the hype as I'd hoped. And this is coming from someone who loves the Whisperer arc a lot. But this has to go in B tier. Yeah, I think B tier's fine. Above Miles Behind Us, above March to War, above Life Among Them, above What We Remain? Yeah, above Calm Before, above New Beginning. Fuck it, I'm putting it top of B. You know what? It might even go in A. Let's look at the moments in it before I decide. How about that, huh? Negan gives Rick Alpha's head. We get Lucille breaking over Beta's back, which is fucking amazing. We get the flaming arrows raining down on the hilltop. This is a packed one. In fact, 2 packed, I believe. One of my favorite moments in here, though, is when Dwight puts on a Whisperer mask and does the famous line, "When in Rome," which is such a fun bit. The main reason it does rank a tiny bit lower than like some of these other big battle like volumes like All Out War is because it feels a tiny bit rushed. I believe that the Whisperer War could have been a 2-parter just like All Out War. What I loved the most about the Whisperer saga leading up to this point was that it was a slow burn and we really got to soak into like the atmosphere and sheer horror of what the concept of the Whisperers are, right? So the fact that like the actual climax of this conflict happens in only 6 issues, which is what this volume ends up being, just over maybe, is a bit anticlimactic after the slow burn of an intro to such a horrific, body horror centric villain like the Whisperers, you know? I would have liked it if it was more of a slow burn of a conflict like All Out War was. That's what I liked about All Out War so much, is that they let the story breathe over 2 volumes rather than just the one. I do feel like they burnt through the Whisperer War volume a bit too fast, and it could have done with being split in half and having a bit more time to breathe. But yeah, it's still a very, very strong volume. That was me putting it down, but it still landed at the top of B. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's great stuff. But now we move on, fucking hell, to volume 28. Fuck me. This one I've been dreading to talk about because of the fact that I guarantee that this will be like a 10-minute segment on this volume alone. But we have A Certain Doom, which, holy shit. This volume existing is the entire reason why I wanted the Whisperer War to be 2 parts. Once this volume comes around and does what it does, the Whisperers are just swept under the rug and no one gives a flying fuck about them anymore, because this volume does something to the Walking Dead story that shakes it to its very core. This is going in S tier, and I'm sorry if you disagree, but you're just wrong. this goes right to the top of S. I'm sorry, but it's just how it is. I'm sorry, but A Certain Doom is the very best of The Walking Dead. It is the singular defining moment of the series. It is the climax. Everything after it is a epilogue and conclusion. This is like the most hype the story has ever been. First and foremost, I'm going to talk about the biggest bit at the end because that's going to take up the most time. The mega horde flooding into Alexandria at the start is so hype. Seeing Negan saving Rick is such an amazing moment, and the entire dynamic between Rick and Negan in this volume is palpable. It is so exciting. It is so fun to see them converse while they're about to die. And like I say, Alexandria essentially getting a No Way Out Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, is something we never thought we'd see again. But we did, and Robert Kirkman makes it not a rehash and makes it somehow more exciting. We get the moment where the mega herd eventually gets sent over the cliff. We get Rick accidentally killing Sherry. We get the Saviors like mini rebellion on Rick's doorstep and Negan having to come out and basically shut that shit down. There are so many great things in this volume, but the thing that propels this to the very top of the best of this series is when, in the midst of all the chaos, we see Andrea's neck with a zombie bite. Andrea's death was really something that is uncomparable to anything we've seen. It is just a moment that really shook up the Walking Dead series and set it on its path to concluding. Once Andrea was killed off, there was really nothing that the series could do that was more shocking, more horrifying. And I think Robert Kirkman knew that, which might be why he ended it when he did. With Andrea dying, they do it so perfectly. They do it in such a haunting, just visceral, brutal, but also emotional and somber way. Andrea essentially gets to say goodbye to everyone, and everyone grieves over Andrea, because Andrea, like I say, excuse me, is just like one of the most important characters of the story, and to see someone go out like that is so horrific. And this volume essentially breaks Rick down to his very core. Everything that I love about the Walking Dead comic book series is on display in this one. It has the political intrigue of the different communities with the Saviors' rebellion on Rick. We get the shock horror quick deaths with Rick accidentally killing Sherry and that creating some tension there. We get Negan having his amazing conversations with Rick when they're trapped after he saves Rick. We get a giant zombie horde flooding into Alexandria. And then you get one of the most shocking moments in the entire story. I want to say the most shocking moment in the entire story, which is Andrea dying. I don't know how to put into words just how important and how integral this volume is to the entire overall story. But this thing does literally everything right and ticks every box as to what I love so much about the Walking Dead comic book series and why I love it so much. I'm gonna shut up now before I go on an absolute rant and turn into gibberish. Read it. Please fucking just read it for yourself. Yeah, it's amazing. But now we're going to move on to the final 4 volumes, the final act of The Walking Dead. We have volume 29, which is Lines We Cross. Okay, this one is not my favorite. We get Eugene's crew going to the Commonwealth. We get Maggie nearly killing Negan, which is such a beautifully written moment in the story, and essentially writes out Negan from the rest of The Walking Dead. This is like one of his final moments. The aftermath of Andrea and the Whisperers is obviously palpable in here. There's still a big weight and thickness to the air with everything that's going on here. But there are some moments that I don't love as much, like Beta's being disposed of just randomly. I don't love as much, really. Like him just going up against Jesus and Aaron and just getting killed randomly is just a bit of a meh send-off. The introduction to Princess is cool, I guess, but a lot more of it is just set up to the final act, which is a tiny bit rushed, if I'll be honest with you. I don't love it. I also don't hate it. I'm sticking it like here, I reckon. Maybe even in D. I don't know. I think it's fine. Cool. Yeah. Lines across. It's decent. It does its job, I guess. But there are some bits that I'm not very fond of. But yeah. Now we move on to volume 30, A New World Order. This one is probably my least favorite of The Walking Dead. It's going in D, I reckon. This is just a lot of setup and not much else. And considering the Commonwealth is probably my least favorite arc of the Walking Dead series, the setup to said arc is going to be very much a snooze fest for me. We introduce Lance and Mercer and the Miltons, and Pamela visiting Rick at the end is cool. But for the most part, it's just checking out the Commonwealth and seeing what it's about. And for that, it just lands at the bottom. I don't think it's all that great, to be honest. Unlike Lines We Cross, it doesn't have some of those standout moments like the Negan and Maggie moment. So yeah, volume 30 does have to land at the very bottom, I'm really sorry to say. But now we move on to volume 31, A Rotten Core. This one's alright. It does its job well, and it does what it needs to for the one that follows. But it doesn't have much of an identity outside of that. I will admit, all of the sequences of Rick showing Milton around the different communities like Hilltop, Kingdom, Sanctuary, it's a lot of fun because it is basically what we didn't know at the time but would be a victory lap. We get, like I say, to see those places for what we didn't realise at the time but was the last time. But other than that, this volume is a tiny bit rushed. A lot of what it does is set up for the final one, and a lot of the political intrigue of the Commonwealth that doesn't actually go anywhere very much. All of that story stuff with like the political intrigue and the tenseness of like the social hierarchy within the Commonwealth, all of that story just kind of gets completely snuffed in the final volume, essentially, which we'll get to, don't you worry. But for the most part, it does the job well. It's just it has some of the same problems of pacing as the second volume does with Miles Behind Us. How we needed more room to breathe with this one, I reckon, which is why it goes here. It doesn't go in D tier because it has the moment where Rick shoots Dwight, which is a moment that I did not see coming and very much was shocked about. Very good moment, but it rushes through it a bit too fast. But yeah, there you go. The Rotten Core, volume 31. Right, now we are on the last leg. We are on volume 32, Rest in Peace. I spoke very highly about this volume when it first came out. Now, I have mixed feelings on it after rereading it a couple times and rereading the story at large and seeing that this is where the entire thing ends. On a whole, I like it. What I will say, to get a positive note out first before I say some criticisms, it is the ending we wanted, okay? The old man Carl telling, baby Andrea the stories of his father is the only way you can really conclude The Walking Dead satisfyingly, and they nail it. Robert Kirkman nails that aspect of it. The Commonwealth conclusion feels a tiny bit rushed, much like Rotten Core. That might have been by design because Robert Kirkman wanted to wrap it up here. So the Commonwealth side of it, quite underwhelming. We don't really get to see too much of a strong conclusion to that arc in here. But that's not what this volume is about. Rick's speech at the end caps off that bookmark in the story very, very well, and him saying we are not the Walking Dead is a nice full circle moment, and I really enjoy it. I don't have a problem with Rick dying. I think it's fine. Him dying in his sleep is a tiny bit anticlimactic, but I get the message behind it, which is why I don't mind it playing out the way it did, because of what Carl says later, where Carl breaks down after the fact when he cries on his way back and basically says, Rick created this world so that we could say goodbye. Andrea got to say goodbye. All these people got to say goodbye, but Rick didn't. Which is such a heartbreaking final note to end on, but I think it's kind of perfect. Because The Walking Dead has always been a story that was about the real world and how unfair it can be, and how people in that world need to find meaning of their own. And from that angle, it's perfect. But I can definitely understand why Rick's death didn't hit right with some readers and still doesn't hit right with people, because it does come out of nowhere. It does come out of nowhere, and you don't see it coming, and it is shocking, and then it's over, and it's a bit underwhelming to have Rick Grimes die in such a way. But I get the meaning behind it. I get it. I get its purpose. And then the flash forward to Old Man Carl, and seeing the world evolve beyond Rick, but seeing that statue of Rick, it's a fitting end. It's perfect. It's a perfect ending. So I can't really ask for more. Which is why I'm going to put it in A tier. Ooh, behind All Out War. That's where I'm putting it. Because it does its job well. It's the ending that we wanted. It's the only ending that would have worked for The Walking Dead. And it is a very thematic conclusion to this story. There you go. That was The Walking Dead Ranked from Volume 1 to Volume 32. I've been talking for literally an hour and a half. My voice is gone, so I'm going to go and eat a few strepsils. But yeah, there's my full list of The Walking Dead. In fact, it is quite sad to see New World Order on its own at the bottom, so I'm just going to put it at the bottom of C and remove row D. There you go. That feels a lot better. Because there isn't really anything in the Walking Dead comics that I don't love to pieces. There are just some moments I like more than others. The only weaker moment of the comic is the Commonwealth, right? And that's only because it was a tiny bit too rushed, and some of the moments were a bit half-baked and not really foreshadowed or maybe thought out as well as Robert Kirkman maybe hoped. But those are like my only like minor gripes with the stuff in row C. Like most of the story is perfection. There is a reason why this is my singular favorite comic book series of all time, and if it wasn't for this series, there would be a piece missing of me. There's a lot from The Walking Dead that I've taken that I hold on to emotionally. Just want to quickly say a big thank you to the man himself, Robert Kirkman, for being the fucked up sadistic genius that he had to be able to create a series like this. But yeah, that's all I have to say. The video is long enough as it is, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. I very much hope you guys enjoyed it. Also, well fucking done if you made it all the way to the end. That is no small feat. If the amount of time that I've been talking in the raw recording is anything to go by, this is going to be a long one. Hopefully you'll see more Walking Dead themed videos later this year, but I don't want to fill your head with empty promises, so we'll just keep our fingers crossed and hope that that will happen. But yeah, that's it. Once again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.